Hey everyone, welcome to this AZ-2007 Accelerating Application Development by using GitHub Copilot. My name is Peter Detender and I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer. In this module, we're going to focus on developing code features using the amazing GitHub Copilot. If you missed any of the other modules and it's becoming a bit too hard, too challenging to understand what's really happening, I would remind you that we do already have a few other modules out of this course as well. Now, this course is really, I would say, the magic little piece into becoming a better developer. Why? Because it's really about how you're going to use GitHub Copilot as the AI-based pair programmer, right? Allowing you to write code for you. And you can think about a lot of different scenarios, allowing you to integrate code completion, one of the still, to me at least, as not being a full-time developer, amazing features of GitHub Copilot. But it also allows you to integrate GitHub Copilot best practices. Based on the project you're working on, based on the files you have open, it's actually going to train itself on the fly, you could say, and integrating a lot of your already existing company assets to start integrating, helping you becoming more efficient in writing code. And then one of the last touching points here is not only using it to write code for you, helping you as that pair programming assistant, but also allowing you to actually transform code across different development languages. And all that, as you already know if you watched other modules in this course, little bit in PowerPoint, but extensively zooming in on all the features using a set of different demos. So with that, I would say let's get started. I can imagine you're eager to start seeing how GitHub Copilot is actually helping you writing code. But before that, let's move back to our little whiteboarding exercise as a warm-up for this module. Another question here, how are you incorporating the usage of generative AI for assisting in code completion today? So it's not about I'm using GitHub Copilot, although that would be a fair answer, but it's more about how are you integrating it without using GitHub Copilot. My assumption is that the most common scenario for now the last couple of months is probably relying on a ChatGPT-alike generative AI scenario. Or why not using Microsoft Copilot? Or again, any other generative AI platform, why not? Obviously doing the same, so instead of having that chat experience and asking questions using prompts, you could do the same but starting from code that you're going to copy into that chat conversation. Depending a bit on the tool you're using, you could actually upload code snippets. I'm not talking about copy pasting, but in this case, like uploading JSON file, .NET class file, something like that, and then asking the generative AI tool, explaining what's happening in that code and maybe even rewriting it. Another scenario which probably still works is just searching the internet and using public code to help you understanding what's happening and maybe using that as an example. And then also still fine is obviously the scenario where you're not using generative AI for your code. Obviously, this is all to get you into that mindset, how amazing this module is going to be, explaining how GitHub Copilot can help you writing and rewriting code. So with that, let's move on with the presentation. Now, when you think about your job as a developer, there's a lot of different scenarios, but you could come into an existing company, but joining a new development team, maybe working on building that next great, hopefully I would say AI-influenced, inspired application. But it's all new to you. You're not familiar with the AI services. You're not familiar with the AI SDKs. Maybe you're not even familiar with writing code in Visual Studio or VS Code. So that's where GitHub Copilot is going to become your trusted buddy to really help you with that. On top of that, you could already be part of an existing team where you've been in the company, you know the guidelines, you know the best practices, you know how to write code, but now you're going to rely on Copilot to really help you becoming even better as a developer. Again, what I mentioned in one of the first modules, the getting started one, is also having more fun in the job while writing code. So where it comes down to here is using the GitHub Copilot chat completion, or code completion. Now, what's the difference here in short? Code completion means that you're inside your Visual Studio VS Code writing code window, and you're going to rely on the documentation, you're going to rely on copy-pasting snippets, but you no longer have to do that. You're going to start writing a little piece of code, which sometimes could be an explanation, like a one-liner. I want you to do this. And within a split second, GitHub Copilot is going to present you a sample snippet of code. Where now you're going to use the chat suggestion to really have that conversational context, starting from a larger scope, asking a question, what we now call prompt engineering, right? Where you're going to move into, please, my dear GitHub Copilot, can you help me moving from this larger context and gradually moving down and ultimately providing you the code completion that you need directly from within that chat conversation. Now, the real benefit here is that, again, you need to know how to approach that GitHub Copilot. So what we describe here is a few best practices. Sounds heavy, sounds complex, but it's just some guidelines how to really get started. So in short, I would say provide as much context as possible. Now, what does this mean? You're inside your development environment. Visual Studio VS Code, the experience is gradually the same. You open up X amount of files related to that specific project. Real time, your GitHub Copilot is going to use all those open files as the source of information, which now means that you no longer have to translate sample code that you find on public GitHub open source repos, maybe in some documentation, maybe on other public internet code websites, and trying to understand it first of all, but also trying to map it with your corporate specifics, or maybe with your specific naming conventions and what else you could think of. So that's again where it's going to learn while using it. Another example is, again, see it as through Copilot. You're still in control. It's going to provide suggestions, but it's really up to you to accept them. It's not going to rewrite code if you don't allow it to rewrite. That's mainly what it means. And then also trying to be as, I would say, hard as difficult. Try to think of you managing your Copilot pair programmer and helping it, tweaking it, providing feedback, and all that using the same chat interface. There's a lot more here. I could continue sharing more and more best practices, but in the end, it's going back to the core of the amazing generative AI nowadays, and it's using your natural language. Try to write a prompt, ask a question, right? That's what it means. And start from a high-level overview. You're a senior developer writing code in, .NET 9, .NET 8, Java, Node, Go, any other language. And you really need to tell GitHub Copilot, what is the context? Next to that, you could also ask for more details, or you could provide more details where you're going to go well, this is the scope, this is the development language, although technically you don't really have to do that because obviously GitHub Copilot is intelligent enough to recognize the code that you're using. But you could ask to help you writing a method, writing a class, writing a controller, writing API calls, and so many other features that, again, you as a developer would typically need to think of yourself. So try to start from, this is what I as a developer would do, but now integrating, relying a lot more on GitHub Copilot to help you with that. And helping, assisting, I would say is really the key word here. So with that, I'm going to walk you through a few screenshots, talking through a few examples, and then all the way at the end of the module, I'm going to shift to a collection of demos to not only talk about how amazing it is, but actually showing you in real life demos how amazing it truly is. So one of the first examples here is code line completion. So what is code line completion? You start typing little piece of code. In this example, the screenshot here, you start creating something like double calculate customer expenditures. Like we're in this sample app, and I'll walk you through some more details on that later on in the actual demo. And we want to validate something. We want to ask Copilot to help us writing some code. Now, you don't need to ask. You don't need to provide a lot of details. You start typing double something something, and it's going to try and complete the syntax of that code snippet for you as good as possible. Now, why do I emphasize as good as possible? Again, remember, it's a co-pilot. It's not the main pilot. It's not replacing you as the developer, and you are still in control. You validate, like, does this actually looks like the code snippet that I was expecting? And obviously, you can still make changes. So you could accept it. You could accept it and then moving on to the next line, doing the exact same thing. Or why not later on switching to the chat conversation and reusing maybe a little bit of copy paste as well, providing sample code, help me rewriting it, and all the other fun stuff you could do with it. Continuing here with a second example, it's basically the exact same concept, but what it's doing is still the code line completion feature. Now, what's important here, it somewhat, I would say, ensures that the code it provides is now as close as possible. And yes, in more cases, it's actually 100% spot on based on all the other files that you already have open in your project. Use that again once more. I need to emphasize that as much as possible. Use that natural language. So literally here, like in the green line, if you could see that it's green, obviously, but in the screenshot, it's going to tell you, like, we do have a question here. Can you help me writing a method named expense category sums and providing the description what it actually needs to do? So you literally provide that description, and in turn, in just a couple of seconds, it's going to provide you that little snippet of code. And then back to our Copilot GitHub chat experience. So in other modules already briefly described the concepts of using GitHub Copilot, and next to that, using the GitHub Copilot chat. Out of my own experience, but it doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing, right? But out of my personal experience, I almost live inside the chat experience the whole time when I'm writing code, when I'm asking it to explain code, and also creating documentation. The chat conversation makes it so much more natural to you. Why? Because if you take a step back and you think about how maybe you're already using AI in your day-to-day job as a developer, could be just Microsoft Copilot, could be ChatGPT, could be some other generative AI tool, you would start from the browser, which means you have your development environment on one side, and you're going to open up your browser, you're going to use public internet trained information, and you still need to copy-paste. Well, now with the Copilot chat experience, it's all embedded inside your development environment, which means obviously that it's just one window. You don't have to switch back and forth, and you don't even have to copy-paste code from some external source into your code anymore. It's all part of that same, I would say, almost natural experience to continue writing code. So what you can do here is opening a workspace. In this example, in the screenshot, it's creating a new workspace. We talked about the command line here in some other modules, but a short repeat. Add workspace allows you to create this new Copilot workspace environment. Think of it as a project scope for your application solution. And you're going to do /new, and you're going to provide a little explanation like, hey, my dear Copilot, I want you to help me creating code for this kind of example. In this case, it's a console application using C#.NET language. It's going to provide you the real base starting point using like the program CS file, as you can see here, and it's also including a basic README file. Like, think of this as the starter template for you as a developer to start creating new applications. And then from here, you can again continue. You start writing an explanation, providing a little prompt, you could say, inside your code window, and it's going to provide you a little snippet of code as the answer. And again, the answer is considered a suggestion. It's up to you if you want to use it, yes or no. Using it here means I'm going to copy paste it, or you could live embed it inside the code view that you're already in. Like maybe a selection of a few lines of code. You're at the end of that selection, and it's literally injecting the new code snippet at the next line for you. And then the other screenshot example here is again generating code, allowing you to provide a description where now again we're using the chat integration. I want to create a regular expression like a regex, one of the more complex things I think if you're a starting developer. And now you just provide, I want you to validate an expression for validating email. Could be pretty complex, where in just a split second, it's going to provide you the code, not just super generic, but again, already mapped with what it already learned. And the what means the GitHub Copilot interface already learns from other files. Maybe it's reusing the exact same regex expression that you already used in another code snippet file. And again, making it as easy for you to use or reuse, or providing it as a new suggestion. You just accept it, and that's pretty much all it takes. And then last here, before I'm going to switch to a sequence of demos, is also using it to translate code from one language into another. And you could go like, but how does that actually work? How is it possible that a tool like GitHub Copilot is now capable of recognizing code in one language and moving it into another language? Well, the magic piece behind the scenes, I would say, is again that large language model. That's really the core of generative AI. So you could think of this as translating code, converting code from one programming language to another, or maybe not just the full application, not the full solution, right? But really using it for, again, an individual file, maybe selecting a snippet of code and asking it to transform. Not always that specific for building AI-inspired applications, but an easy example that, again, mainly being a Microsoft technical trainer, I'm using is, for example, to help me creating bicep template files, migrating from ARM to bicep. I know there's a lot of different ways to do that. I used to go to the browser, opening up Copilot Web, and now I'm all doing this from within my Visual Studio Code environment. So with that, a lot of really cool features that I talked about. And as you know, Peter likes to not only talk about it, but also showing you live with a couple of demos how this all works. And remember, you can watch the demos, but also remember, we do have that sample application code project that I'm using as a baseline for walking you through the demos, but you could actually go to that GitHub repo and go through the demos at your own pace, learning from it, experimenting with it. That would be the main idea as well. So this module was all about code completion, right? So again, a sequence of demos here, where for the first one, we're going to start with actually creating a new little console app. It's just something really cool to show you how you could actually use the Copilot chat integration to give you that kickstart, like a starter project. Again, based on nothing more than a little bit of prompt engineering magic. You could start from a blank canvas, but I'm still inside my reference project that we used for previous demos. I'm going to open my chat completion. I'm going to start a new chat. And although I'm inside an already existing project, I could do something like add workspace, triggering a new workspace here, /new, which is the keyword to actually create a new project, and then describing what my project is about. So we could do something that sounds like a new console application. So it's not a web app, it's not Blazor, it's not doing anything else. We're going to provide a name. So this could be APL 2007 module 3, because that's the module we're presenting in. And then last, we're going to define some of the actual development language characteristics. So we could do, I'm going to move this a little bit, use C# language version 12 and .NET 8, and then only create the .cs file and the .cs project file, because that's like using a starter template, you could say. So I guess that's probably all we need. We could actually add some other parameters. Let me go back. And you don't have to do this in one single prompt, but why not? One of the things that every now and then I forget about, but we could add something like enable the implicit usings and allow nullable to make my class's definition a little bit more straightforward. So this is triggering the creation of a new workspace. So it already creates like a suggestion, proposed directory structure. So we have the folder name, we got a program CS, the CS project file, and as expected, a little README file as well. Now up to this point, nothing actually happened. So I'm going to hit that create workspace button. And it's going to ask me like, where exactly do you want to create this project? So I'm just going to move it into my download section for now. And it starts creating the project. It starts creating the files. And it's asking me like, oh, everything's there. Do you want me to actually open the new workspace? Obviously, we're going to go for yes. I'm not going to, I'm going to save my old project. We're now inside. We have our project file nicely recognizing implicit usings, recognizing nullable, and highlighting .NET 8. I can move into my program. There's obviously not too much besides the starter console hello world. So from the instructions, I'm just going to grab a little snippet of code. And it already has our quarterly income report class. And as you can see, there's a little bit of additional documentation in there, some of the steps that we're going to use later on. Now, one of the really nice things about code completion is that you can actually provide your own explanation, not using the chat window on the side, not using the inline chat completion, but now doing nothing more than what you probably already did in the past, just adding a description like this is what I actually want to get out of it. So what it means is behind or after our main class here, I'm going to add another little component starting with a little bit of a description / public constructor that we're going to call sales data. And then from there, we're going to define what your class should look like. And interesting enough, even that part is already getting covered here. I'm just going to show you that you don't have to accept anything that it just suggests, although I think in this case, it's almost what I actually expected. So I'm going to include the following fields. And then from here, you just provide a listing, the date sold, the department name, I think would be interesting for our store report overview, the product ID, quantity of items sold, and then again, it's just trying to analyze what you're actually asking for, and then asking like last here, total sales amount, which I think is not what we need because we're going to run that calculation, the summation later on. So I'm going to add a last one here, unit price. After my command line, I'm adding one new blank line, and within a split second, it's nicely relying on the completion of my code here, suggesting me how to create that new constructor. Sales data is in there, and I didn't specify like the characteristics, but it recognizes date sold, department name, and it's identifying some with a string type, some with the integer type, and the double for the unit price. Now, nothing blocks you from obviously continuing making changes to it. So from here, you could obviously accept it. You could do something else. You could also go like, well, thanks for trying, but I can actually do this. I wouldn't say better on my own, but you could actually just go like, well, it was a good attempt, but I still gonna make my own changes into it. And that's again that suggestion approach, right? Where it's gonna try and help you. Again, that's what I personally like about a Copilot branding, that you're still in charge. You can decide if you're gonna accept the suggestions, the changes, accepting the fixes, or you could go like, well, that's interesting, but for now, I'm not gonna use it. Another idea we have here is, for example, integrating a method that allows us to generate test data. So we have our sales data structure. So we're going to add 2 new empty lines, and then from there adding another sort of explanation, where now it's again adding some comment, adding a new line into it, and it provides me with a full testing data sequence. So what's important here, I started with using the traditional comment of a line like // but now if you do the same with /* and then obviously closing it at the end, another way to add comments, traditional comments, into your code. Again, nothing new, nothing Copilot specific. It's how we added comments into our code for the last couple of years already, but it's even still recognizing what we actually want to get out of it. So now it's nicely returning an array of sales data. The method is generating like 1,000 records. That's what this little line of code here is doing. And then from there, again, I don't want to focus too much on the actual content of what the app is about, what the code scenario looks like. But in the end, we're nicely accepting it. Why? Because it looks pretty accurate, pretty complete in what we're actually asking for. Now, again, it doesn't stop us from making changes to the code. So, for example, we could change the date. So imagine in my 1,000 records, that's like create a 1,000 randomly generated sales data records, where now it's zooming in on the date. Interesting enough here, it's not recognizing the date only as the constructor, which now means that this should probably be the date sold, because that's what we do have in our constructor. And then random next might be a little bit too random, where we could go for a fixed year. I'm doing 2023, but this could actually be like 2025 or any other. And then still relying on random next and picking up a value between 1 and 13, and then another 129. All looks pretty good. And that's the main thing again, where it's in the end still relying on providing suggestions. It's coming up with code ideas. It's coming up with, whoops, there's a little mistake here. Sometimes autocomplete is doing a bit more than what we're expecting. It's not random generator, but it's random next. There we go. And again, try to use it as that assistant. It's going to give you a pretty accurate suggestion, but you're still in the driver's seat, allowing you to accept the code, to maybe not accept the code. That's really up to you. Now, moving on in our example here, we're again still creating our quarterly sales report. So what we're going to do here is going back into a little snippet of our code, where all the way down here, we just have an easy example for now, public void quarterly sales report. So that's our method. And for now, it's only providing a console line. So we're going to update that in a few manual steps, and then again, integrating some code updates out of our GitHub Copilot assistance. So I'm injecting my sales data component here. And without doing anything, as you can see, just giving it a little bit of time, it's nicely adding a lot of the numerations that we would expect from like the quarterly sales report code generator. Next to that, it's also integrating a nice if then else loop. And again, I didn't specify anything of this. So it's just recognizing like, oh, you want a method allowing you to generate the quarterly sales report. And from there, if I scroll down a bit, since our sample app had a console write line, meaning like we're actually going to create this little report from within our console app, it's actually adding all the statistics based on the 4 quarters that we have. So another easy, I would say, nice example where it's actually doing a lot of the thinking work already for us without breaking the code, without needing to think and go back and forth across different files. And that's again what makes it pretty interesting to use. So I guess from here, it's pretty much what we wanted to show you as part of this first demo, using the chat completion to literally start writing code, updating code. That's the main part here. So for this next demo, we're still in our code completion, but like we did before, it's all from within the code file itself. Well, now for this next part of the demo, I'm going to show you a bit how it works using the chat window to actually help us with about the same task. Now, every now and then, I do get feedback like in live presentations, right, during training, like you're just relying on a lot of code and you're not always validating it. So what it means here is that obviously we're somehow building that quarterly income report little console application. And I think every now and then, indeed, it's actually a pretty good remark to run my code. Not just validating, like, it's not because there's no error messages showing up, like not the red squiggly lines, right? That it means that your app is actually working. So the easiest to test here is running .NET Run, where at least I can see that there are no errors, so the build compile is fine, but it's not producing statistics. I'm not seeing my sales report. Now, why not? Because I actually forgot two steps where I need to specify, like, you need to create some output. So to show you how this works, and it's a little bit segue from the previous demo, remember at the start of that project, we had two command lines where I immediately jumped into creating a new constructor for the sales data. And we could now actually go back to this previous command line. So here it says call the generated sales data method, which means I go to that command line. I'm just going to add a new line behind it, like just using the enter key, and it's adding the required code after that. Same for the quarterly sales method. I'm just going to move to the next line, and it's completing report quarterly sales report. I'm going to save my changes, which means if I'm now running it, it's nicely presenting the numbers that I'm expecting. And obviously the numbers are randomly generated because that's what our method actually asked for a little bit more down here. And then using 1,000 randomly generated sales, we don't really have them. It's just showing you some sample data. And that's where the numbering, I would say down here, the outcome of running my little app is presenting results. So pretty good. Our business actually generated some sales, but the numbering, the formatting, I would say isn't maybe the best. And that's what we're going to fix in this next part of the demo. But thanks for the reminder that running .NET Run, in this case for our C# based application, is probably a good thing. And maybe I should try and remind myself to do that a little bit more. So that let's move on with some of the other examples where GitHub Copilot is again going to help us dramatically in writing code, cleaning up code, maybe rewriting code. So we have our sales data constructor here. And now I'm going to use my inline chat completion. So I'm going to do Control-I. And again, you already know from previous demos, when I'm calling Copilot, I need to provide a prompt. So it's a pretty long one here. So I just pasted it in. I need a public constructor product departments that contains static string array providing 8 clothing industry departments, and then just providing explanations like I would say you would ask your peer developer, your colleague, right? Create a separate string array defining 4 character abbreviations. Each abbreviation must be unique, and so on and so on. So from here, I just gonna kick it off, and about the same behavior as what you saw in previous demos to write explanations or documentation, it's providing a suggestion. So it's respecting the source control way of highlighting code changes, which in my case, based on that GitHub Copilot theme I'm using, it's showing me like some new green lines, which means, hey, I'm actually adding code. I'm not removing anything in the app you already have. So I think from here, it looks pretty close to what I expected. So I got my department names. A little bit further down, I have my department abbreviations, and that's exactly what I was asking for. So I'm going to go up in the chat window and accepting the code changes. Remember here, you could also do the /doc to actually write some documentation. Since we already showed you how to do that, I'm going to save you from that step in my demo step here. So next, we're in our product department, where we are now adding about the same, but using the manufacturing sites. So I could do something like making sure I'm outside of my product departments. There we go. Adding a new line, Control-I to call that GitHub Copilot. And now I'm doing about the same. I need a public constructor manufacturing site containing a static string for 10 manufacturing sites, giving it some names, using 3-character codes, including the ISO country code. And we don't have to specify anything else what we mean by that. So as you could expect, it's providing that new constructor manufacturing sites, and it has a few different regions there. So again, I like it. I'm going to accept it. And then last, I'm going to make some final changes in my sales data structure. So I'm going to select my sales data, and just to make sure, I'm going to use the selection option. Once more, doing Control-I, and I'm going to make some changes here where I'm going to make it easy just copying my sample prompt. What I'm doing now is asking like, hey, GitHub Copilot, can you help me adding a double field called base cost, as well as an integer field called volume discount, and then also updating the product ID from integer to a string. Now here I would say, since it's only a minor change, it's adding some new fields, it's renaming like the type of the data from text or string to integer, or the other way around. You could go like, well, maybe you don't have to rely on GitHub Copilot to actually help you with that, but I just wanted to show you how easy it actually can become. And you're going to see, at least I hope, that the more you're going to start using it, it becomes so natural to start, I would say, forgetting about writing code changes yourself in a manual way, but really relying on Copilot to help you with that. Just going to validate. I think it all looks quite accurate. It nicely added our double base cost. It added the integer type for volume discount, and it also updated product ID from integer back to a string. So once more, we're going to accept it, and assuming that everything is working fine. Moving on in our demo sequence here, one of the other steps in our creation of the quarterly sales report is updating the generate sales data method. So we need to, again, make some changes. What we're going to do here is updating the department name assignment, allocating from the randomly part of the name into the actual department name. So we're going to search for our generate sales data, Control-F, generate sales data, there we go. We're going to select the code that we use for assigning the department name. Let's see where we have that. I think it's going to be this one. Control-I, it's already recognizing the selection, and again, using nothing more than our natural language. I'm asking Copilot, can you please help me updating the department name assignment to randomly select a department name using the prod department's data structure that we created before. And as you can see, it's immediately updating. And for now, once more, I'm just gonna accept it. We could continue, obviously, again, making more changes to the app. So after our department name here, let's add a few empty lines, and we're going to inject a few more code snippets. These are not coming from Copilot. nicely injecting them. And then I'm going to select my index of the department, starting inline chat, Control I, and we're going to assign the index. And again, relying on our natural language approach, assign the array index for the department name using index of department. We're going to do the same for all the other fields and objects we have here. But you could also do like, well, thanks for helping, but I actually don't like it. So up till now, all my demos included accepting it, which could actually give you maybe a little bit of the wrong impression, like, oh, anything that GitHub Copilot is suggesting looks to be 100% spot on. So it's always accepting, and done. But obviously, again, you're in control. It doesn't mean that you just have to accept everything that Copilot is suggesting. So easily discard, or you just close the chat using Control I again, and that's actually clearing the code, but it didn't even make any real code updates. Another little change that we need to integrate in our app, but what we already allocated in the same way before, is now asking for an index of our department, assigning the department abbreviations, doing the same for our first string, selecting the line, Control I, pasting it in. Going to do the same for the other objects we have. So with that, we made a lot of changes, and just all based on the same concept. So using Control I, updating the part of the code we already have, using natural language, describing what you want, like adding the index for the sizes, adding the color codes that we want to use, and all the other fields that we speeded up in the demo a little bit. But in the end, it was all based on the same concept. Starting from the code you have, running the updates using Control I inline chat conversation with Copilot, and using your natural language to really update your code. And as I learned from the start of my demo, running the code updates and then validating .NET Run, and it actually still comes back with some nicely outcomes of our sales report. So this completes our second part of this demo in this module. So for this last one, although the two previous demos in this module were all about writing code, rewriting code if you want, adding a lot of intelligence thanks to GitHub Copilot into our already existing application syntax, is now showing something totally different, I would say, where we're going to start from a little Python application, technically doing the same thing, but using a different language. Because up till now, our sample code was based on the C#.NET framework using .NET 6, but that's just a demo app, right? But now I'm going to show you how powerful it actually is to translate from, in this case, Python into C# code. Again, it's a demo, but you can follow along using the GitHub sample app location out of that Microsoft Learning AZ-2007 repo. If you missed that link, I would say maybe go back to one of our first modules in the course where we're guiding you through the starting point of the demo project. So in this case, I'm inside APL 2007 Module 3 Python. And if you're a little bit familiar with Python code, the way it's typically structuring is a source folder, a file in this case called main.py. There's some testing which we're not really going to use, a README file and some requirements, all part of traditional Python application. So we still have about the same kind of information inside our application because, again, we're building a little app that's allowing us to pull up a console-based quarterly sales or income report. We have the definition of our parameters. We have all the different methods. We have the product departments, manufacturing sites. We define where to generate like the random sales data. We got some reporting and so on and so on. So from here, I would say personally, it's almost mind-blowing to me. What you need to do here is opening your Copilot chat, and how amazing is it that you only need to ask for convert selection, but there's only one file, the main.py, to the target language, which in our case could be C#. This is most probably one of the easiest prompts Azure. We're going to give it a little bit of time. Obviously, it needs to loop through like all the logic in the code, recognizing all the methods, recognizing all the objects. But as you can see here, it actually does a really powerful job and already creating that new application code for us. This was really cool. I'm so excited that all my demos actually worked. And again, I think as a developer, this is really mind-blowing, right? You're thinking about code, you're writing code, you're relying on GitHub Copilot to now really help you becoming a more efficient and even better developer than you already are. Now, unfortunately, we're at the end of this module. Now, a little recap here. This was all about using GitHub Copilot to really become that peer programmer. You're going to use GitHub Copilot to write code, to understand code, to help you with the code completion, using the traditional view, using preferably, if you ask Peter, how to use that from within the chat, completion, conversation, syntax, and context, and then literally experimenting with writing code, accepting code suggestions, copying them inside the different files that you're working with. And then one of the last examples we touched on is not only writing code, but also helping you rewriting code, which means transforming one development language example into another development language example. As always, although it's the end of the module, we don't want you to stop learning a lot more about GitHub Copilot. And that's where we have, again, a few little links here on screen. The first one brings you into the official GitHub documentation website, docs.github.com/Copilot. The second one is zooming in a little bit more on how this works, embedding GitHub Copilot in your Visual Studio Code development environment. And then the last one is touching on a lot of the features that we covered in this module, but providing a lot more details, a lot more additional context for you to review how to turn GitHub Copilot into your AI-inspired pair programmer. With that, I would like to thank you for watching this next module, but also inviting you to join me into even more GitHub Copilot magic in one of the other modules in this course. Thank you for now, and see you again soon.